everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Product Inspiration Series. My name is Juliane Oeser. I'm from the Customer Advisory for Consumer Industries, and today I have the pleasure to have Nadim with me. Nadim is a product manager for the industry solution Order Management for Sourcing and Availability. We call it shortly OMSA. Hi Nadim. Can you tell us why SAP is investing into OMSA?
Absolutely, Juliane. We have observed that retailers face significant challenges in managing orders efficiently across various sales channels. Existing system landscapes are increasingly complex, with customer expectations higher than ever. Secondly, existing sourcing solutions are often based on rules, which typically become more and more over time and are hard to maintain. And what is more, these rule-based solutions often lack focus on business aspects. But this is exactly what matters most. And this is how the OMSA journey started.
Very interesting. And in what concrete scenario does Order Management for Sourcing and Availability help our retailers?
OMSA addresses several key scenarios in modern retail operations. First, it facilitates omni-channel inventory management by providing a unified view of availability across all locations, including distribution centers and stores. As a result, it reduces the risk of stockouts and enables reliable customer promises. Second, OMSA optimizes sourcing strategies by selecting the best source location based on product availability, transportation aspects, and business goals such as lead times, costs, capacity utilization. Third, OMSA also supports the simulation of sourcing strategies so that the business users can optimize them before setting them live. These key scenarios enable our customers to gain a competitive edge in today's dynamic environment.
Very impressive. And how can our customers adopt to this solution? And how does it fit in their system landscape?
Being a native cloud solution, adoption of OMSA is quite simple. You just have to subscribe and deploy on the SAP Business Technology Platform. OMSA is designed to integrate seamlessly with various SAP environments. Customers can leverage SAP's prepackaged integration tools to connect OMSA with their existing landscapes, for example, SAP S/4HANA and SAP Commerce, as well as other SAP Order Management products. Given its API-based approach, it fits very well into various different system landscapes. As a summary, the business focus, easy deployment, and smooth integration into SAP and non-SAP landscapes are the key differentiators our customers will benefit from, and they can expect a very quick return on investment.
Very insightful discussion. But now it's time to take a look into the solution. Enjoy and have fun.
Welcome to the demo of SAP Order Management for Sourcing and Availability. In the next couple of minutes, I will show you the main features of OMSA, focusing on the interplay between a commerce webshop, the OMSA APIs, and the user interface based on which the customers can maintain their sourcing strategies. Please note that much of the intelligence of OMSA happens behind the scenes, invisible to the end user. Therefore, you will also see a rather technical tool in the demo, namely Postman, to make the intelligent features of OMSA visible. Imagine that you're a consumer browsing this webshop that you see here. And you have already put together a little shopping cart comprising 2 items, a dual basket air fryer, which in our example we call P5, and a fully automatic espresso machine, which is called P6 in this example. Now, you would like to proceed to the checkout and click on Next in this webshop page. And now let's see what happens behind the scenes. In order to show the communication between the webshop on the one hand and OMSA on the other hand, we use this tool called Postman, which some of you might know, and that's very well suited to display the communication. Basically, you'll see the calls to the APIs that OMSA provides. In this case, we had the consumer clicking on next in the shopping cart, and this in the background triggers a sourcing call towards OMSA. And this is exactly what we see here. So you see here the related endpoint, and we also see the content of this message, which is also called the payload. And you see in here the two products we just saw on the web page, P5 and P6, with a quantity of 1 each. And along with that, and that's not visible to the consumer, you see a strategy ID 22. This relates to a sourcing strategy, which we will see in a minute. And it also comes along with the destination. So that is the ship to address that the consumer has provided. It was not visible in the example, but this was sent also in the background by the webshop. So in this case, our consumer resides in the US in California. Now let's see what happens if I click send. In the background, this triggers sourcing call, as I said, using this API, and it enables a sourcing algorithm, which at the end provides a sourcing solution, which is basically the best sourcing option for the given shopping cart. And in our concrete example, the proposed result is PADC. That's an abbreviation for Pacific Distribution Center. You would have guessed that, right? And both products are supposed to come from there. And along with the decision of the site, you also get the internal costs that the retailer would have to pay, which is 0.9, and the estimated delivery date, which is also stated here, which is obviously very important to consumers and can be used then for a customer promise. But how did OMSA come up with this solution? So why this solution? And in order to answer this question, we have to take a look at our user interface and the strategy builder. On the screen, you see a list of sourcing strategies, which means you are not limited to one sourcing strategy. The business user can create as many sourcing strategies as they like. For example, you might want to have one for premium customers or standard customers. You might want to differentiate between different product groups and so on. In our case, if you remember, the ID that we used in the sourcing call was the ID 22. This was part of the payload you saw inside Postman. And this is the respective sourcing strategy here in OMSA. If we go inside the details, you see the goals that were selected, and you also see the sites that were selected. So basically these 3 sites are eligible for a sourcing with the strategy with the ID 22. And one of them is obviously the PADC, the Pacific Distribution Center. If we click on edit, we can change the settings. We're not going to change the sites, but we're going to take a closer look at the goals. First of all, I'd like to mention that our users have the option to choose from 5 different goals: utilized capacity, delivery time, cost to ship, shipments per order, and cost to pick and pack. And you can select them as you like. And in our case, 3 of them are selected. Along with the selection of the goals, you also have to specify a goal value, which is important for the sourcing algorithm because it will always optimize against this goal value and tries to achieve it as much as possible. Optionally, you can also define a constraint which would prevent that certain sourcing solutions exceed a certain situation. If you take a look at the utilized capacity, for example, the constraint here would avoid that sites go beyond 100 with their capacity, which is a valid use case. In addition, there is also the weight column, based on which you can define your priorities between the different goals you've specified. And in our case, shipments per order has the highest weight with 50% and cost to ship 35, utilized capacity 15. Now, what happens if we change these weights? Let's do that. Let's replace the 15 here by 30, for example. So we increase the importance of the capacity and we reduce the importance of the cost to ship, for example. Down to 20, obviously they have to add up to 100. Let's review and save the strategy. And then let's see what happens if we execute the same sourcing call again in Postman. Here we see basically still the same sourcing call. It still has the old result. But if we send the same shopping basket again, let's see what the result would be. And as you can see, it has changed. It's no longer the Pacific DC, but it's the SFST, which stands for San Francisco Store in this case, which after the change of the weights in my strategy has become the best sourcing result with internal cost of 1.5 and also a latest delivery date. Now, how did this magic happen? And for that, we have a very nice option, a very nice feature, which is the simulation, which enables you not only to understand a bit better what a solution or how a sourcing solution was selected, but it also enables you to play around with the sourcing solution before actually setting it live, which is very beneficial for our customers because they might want to play around and then try out a little bit before actually setting things live. As you can see here, this sourcing strategy has exactly the same configuration as the one we just used with the same goals and the same weights. It has exactly the same sites assigned to it. And for a simulation, I also have to put together a shopping cart, but also this one is exactly the same as we had in our example in Postman, P5 and P6 with a quantity of 1 each. And the destination is still California in the US. Now, what happens if I click on Run Simulation? So the system shows to you not only one sourcing solution, but 3, explaining to you which options were also considered but did not win. So this already gives you a good indication as to why the sourcing solution SFST in this case was selected. But it also explains to you the goal values and eventually the score based on which the decision was taken, right? So for example, for the KPI utilized capacity, which was one of the KPIs that were selected, San Francisco Store is better than the Pacific DC, for example, because the capacity here is only 61, the utilized capacity that is, and for the Pacific DC it's 90.2. Cost to ship, San Francisco Store is a bit worse than PADC, and in terms of shipments per order, both are equally good. And now in the background, what you basically do, the algorithm compares the actual value here with the goal value. Remember, for capacity we had a goal value of 90. It does the division, and by that normalizes the number, basically taking out the unit of measure. And it does the same for the 2 other KPIs. And by taking out this unit of measure, it enables you to add up these numbers, meaning you can compare KPI or goal values of different goals, like utilized capacity, which is measured in percentage, and cost to ship, which is measured in dollars, and still compare them by just adding up the normalized values. And in the end, this gives you the overall score, which is 0.9 for San Francisco Store and 0.92 for PADC and 1.52 for this other solution, which is a combination of 2 sites, LA Store and 1 other. By the way, if you want to read further information regarding this feature, you can also click here. And this example explains to you very well the whole logic of the sourcing algorithm, which I just explained to you. let's come to the next feature of OMSA. So far we've seen the sourcing feature, we have seen the simulation feature, but one central piece is also the availability, right? And it's also part of the name of OMSA. How does this play into the commerce system here? So on the screen, you again see our consumer web shop, and you see the product details page of this handheld steamer. And in some cases of our customers, they also show the availability of this product even on the website. And in our case, for this product, which has the ID P7, the quantity is 4. So 4 are available. And the question is, where did this information come from? And to answer this question, we have to go back to Postman again and execute a different API this time. Before we called sourcing twice, but in this case, as I told you, it's about availability, and we call the available to sell endpoint. And the payload contains the product with the ID P7, and it asks for the quantity now. Let's see what happens if I do that. Let's check quickly the result. So the result is 14. Well, we would have expected 4, right? Because this is what was shown to you on the website, but there is a reason for it. So this available to sell endpoint basically considers all sites that are available in the system in OMSA. So it adds up the quantities of this product P7 across all sites. But if you remember, in the strategy with the ID 22, I only used 3 sites. And this is what we also offer to our consumers, because the other sites that are in the system, they might be used for different locations, for example, and we don't want to consider them here because the consumer cannot basically take availability from these sites. So that's why we separate that by a different endpoint, which is the availability calculation endpoint. This does basically a similar thing. So you can ask for the available quantity of a product, which is still P7, but you add the sourcing strategy ID, which has the effect that it limits the scope or the availability just to the 3 sites that we saw. And if I execute this one here, I see the result of 4. Now, this should enable me to purchase the product P7. And now I'm back to sourcing. So it's again the previous API that we used. Let's see what happens if we do that. So I use strategy 22. I use the product P7. I add the quantity of 3. So that should be okay, because previously I saw that 4 items are available, and I'm still in California as a consumer. Now let's see what happens when I click on send. Well, basically it tells me that there is no inventory data. Well, this is a bit surprising because the quantity available was 4, and in this shopping cart I was asking for 3. So why is that? So in order to explain that, we have to take a look at another endpoint, which is called available to sell by site. And this gives you the detailed availability of this product split by site, because the number 4 that we saw is the aggregated number. And in this case, if you provide the 3 DCs, then you can get the split between the 3 DCs. And if you take a look at the result, we see that the LA store has 2 available. By the way, it's always P7. The San Francisco store has 2 available, and that's it. And that means this adds up to 4 on the one hand, but they are split across different sites. And OMSA, by default, the strategy does not allow a split of the same product or quantities of the same product across several sites. But there is one configuration inside the strategy builder which enables you to do exactly that. Let's go back to strategy 22 and see how we can change that. Let's edit the strategy And not sure if you have seen that before, but as part of the sourcing configuration, we don't only have the goal selection, but there are a few additional parameters based on which you can change the behavior of the sourcing result. And one of the options is this one here, which says allow splitting quantities of the same product across different sites. And this is exactly our use case, right? And it's switched off. And if I switch it on and save the strategy, let's see what happens with my sourcing call. So basically I can go back to the same sourcing call, which was disallowed previously. And if I send the same sourcing call again, remember, it's still product P7, quantity is still 3. And this time I get a sourcing result. I can also change the visualization, which tells me that this shopping cart will be split. 2 items will be sourced from LA store and 1 item from San Francisco store. In addition, I get a warning. It's not a severe warning, but it just tells you that in this case, one and the same product was sourced from multiple sites. But this is exactly what we enabled, and that's why this is an expected or intended behavior. It also shows you the cost, which are in this case high, but that's also no surprise because we have 2 sites involved. Yeah, this winds up our demo. So I think I was able to show you the main features of OMSA, which include sourcing, simulation, and availability. And I hope you got good insights. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Happy to help. Wish you a great day.